Welcome back to the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome to today's podcast.
And we're here to entertain you and enlighten you, and we're anxious to get your questions. Please let us know where you're from, of course your name, and we'll try to get to all the questions as they stream in. The image behind us is another one of those cool pictures that was taken here in Arizona. Not too far from Phoenix, about an hour-and-a-half drive, is a town called Sedona. And my opinion always has been that it is the #1 landmark in Arizona. The Grand Canyon, of course, gets a lot of play, but Sedona is magical. There are a lot of red rock spires there. It's kind of like Monument Valley, except populated. And here we're at a small mall. It's more of an artist colony and gift shops called Tlaquepaque, and I venture to say that's probably an Indian name, since it's difficult to pronounce. But it's a beautiful little place to hang out and shop, and these are just, or this is one of the pictures that was taken there.
Oh, Tlaquepaque and Sedona, that whole area up there is one of my favorite spots in the entire state of Arizona. So don't miss it if you come down into Arizona at some point.
Absolutely. So first news item, we've got Cattle is the world's largest battery manufacturer now. Did not know that. They're in China, CATL. They're to begin production of a Model 3 performance battery, which is 15% more energy dense than lithium iron phosphate or LFP batteries. And they claim that it will perform better and cost less than nickel cobalt based batteries. There's also a range improvement. The range apparently, based on a 210 watt-hour per kilogram spec, will allow the Tesla Model 3 to go around 700 kilometers, which it turns out is about 438 miles.
Yeah, right around there.
Cattle has been supplying batteries to Tesla. In fact, later on here in this article, the Tesla Model 2 and Model Y, which will be produced at the Shanghai factory at some point, will be built with these new batteries within the next few months. And apparently the factory is fairly close to the Shanghai plant, so supply chain issues are somewhat reduced. Here we go. Cattle so far accounts for more than 1/3 of the total battery sales globally. I didn't realize they were that big. They supply Volkswagen, BMW, Ford, and as well as its main customer, Tesla, with EV batteries. And they are setting up their 70 gigawatt, or their 70 gigawatt per hour factory, just 5 kilometers from Tesla's Shanghai factory. So they can basically drive the batteries there. The precise chemistry of this new battery is not yet been released, but the improved version, they claim, is better than LFP because the F now is getting replaced with a mix of magnesium, zinc, and aluminum. And you know, we talk often about the proliferation of new battery technologies, and we predicted that it was going to be rampant and quick, exponential in fact. Sandy Munro just released the video a few days ago, and it is a new company called Amprium, or at least a new battery. And Jesse, yeah, can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure, 1 second. Yeah, so this, I think Mark has more of the specifics on the actual numbers, but it's from what I understand, it's essentially doubling the capacity of current lithium-ion tech through the use of the new technology. Now, apparently this company's been working on it for a while, and I think Sandy said that he has known about it for a while, but he wasn't able to say anything. But then he did his breaking news video, and I'll pull that up for the audience so you can see that video title, and you can go find that on his YouTube channel.
And just to give you a perspective on specs, we're talking about this new battery from Cattle, which is 210 watt-hours per kilogram. This Amprium battery is being sold as 500 watt-hours per kilogram, so it's more than double this improved battery from Cattle.
Yeah, and I took a look at lithium-ion batteries today are kind of like the alkaline batteries of old. They're all lumped under one name, but there's actually several different chemistries in place. The original lithium-ion batteries are just the nickel metal cobalt or nickel magnesium cobalt. And they're what you consider the traditional batteries. They're in the older Model S's, they're in the Roadsters. They had almost 270 watt hours per kilogram of energy, but they tended to degrade more quickly and be less stable. So you couldn't charge them as quickly, and they would degrade over time. The LFP battery is a much more stable battery and gives you a longer range, but they only come with a maximum of about 160 watt hours per kilogram. So this newer M3P technology is kind of giving us the best of both worlds.
Here's the video. If the audience wants to go see it, you can see this on our YouTube stream. The TikTok people can't see this, but the title of the video is Breaking News. Amprius creates a 500 watt hour per kilogram battery. That's about from 5 days ago on Sandy's channel, Monroe Live.
That would be a remarkable battery to have because, well, we talk about the 270 watt hour per kilo for the original lithium-ion battery. Those were for the Model S's, the long-range Model S's that had the 300 miles of range. The LFP batteries are typically put in the cars that have 200 miles of range. Now we're talking with the M3P batteries that can get up close to 300 miles of range again. We were even talking about the large size batteries can get up to 435 miles of range with a 500 watt hour per kilo battery. Double that 435. And now you're talking about a battery that would be the size of what fits into a Tesla Model S, but would give you about 850 miles of range.
Sure. And like Sandy pointed out, at that point, maybe we want to reduce the weight of the battery to improve the performance of the car and reduce the cost because the mileage or the range is about the same as this older technology.
By all means.
By the way, Sandy, today is Tuesday. Thursday, Sandy will be joining us in this podcast. So make sure you mark your calendar. It'll be an interesting conversation. Our companies have much in common. He's the teardown titan, we're the service titans, and we're going to meet somewhere in the middle and discuss some of the challenges that both companies face.
Look forward to that very much. On LinkedIn, Ingemar Anderson is here from Seattle. Good morning, Ingemar. And Rafael Galvo is here from Brazil. And glad to see that people are following us today from all over the world.
And you know, Ingemar, the one that you just mentioned, he just wrote a book on EVs, and there's a chapter about Gruber Motor Company in that book. So welcome, Ingemar, and thank you for joining us.
That's right, and you even wrote the foreword for that book, correct?
And when it's published, we'll certainly be shouting out and talking about and promoting your book. It was extremely well written, and it's timely because the EV revolution is in full swing, and a lot of people have questions.
Yes. User 59 on TikTok says we should be wearing black suits. One of these days we're going to have to do that. The men in black suit coat, white shirt,
yes,
black tie, and
we've even talked about when we're over in the shop area and I'm in the engineering lab, it would be appropriate to wear a white smock or jacket, being an engineer in the lab. So that may happen as well. I have one of those at home I should bring in.
That would be great. Ryan Clark has also started following us. So thank you for following us, Ryan. We encourage everybody to follow us on the various social media accounts. We have Facebook and TikTok and LinkedIn and YouTube as well. And
then YouTube Shorts. Ian Caldwell says, what do we think of the 500 watt-hour kilogram battery? We just talked about that. And then he adds, it's groundbreaking. Every electric aircraft or drone just doubled their range. And that's one thing Sandy pointed out as well. These types of batteries with the higher energy density are going to change aviation because that's one of the drawbacks in using batteries in aviation is the weight and the short distances.
Yeah, I can see a much bigger revolution potentially in aviation than in automotive in that case. Automotive, you get incremental performance improvements and mileage improvements. Aviation, you're going from not flying to flying.
So Ian Caldwell also asks, when is Gruber going to do their own battery? Keep up the good work. Thank you. You know, we're not a large enough company to invest the hundreds of millions in research and development to develop battery chemistries. And with the proliferation of companies now working on it, we would be, you know, one of the last ones in the game. So we're just pleasantly surprised by all of the companies that are doing great work in that area and can see eventual return on investment. The closest we got to that was one of the graphene battery manufacturers came to us knowing that we did a lot of Tesla work and asked if we had a Tesla Model S car that we would be willing to convert to a graphene battery. And we were 100% committed to it until we found out that because of geometry and logistics, it was not going to be economically feasible for us to do this conversion. So at this point, we have backed out of the graphene project, but it looks like there are even better technologies coming out now than graphene. In fact, I think Sandy pointed out that there are very few graphene mines, but there are you know, plenty of mines that can support this new battery.
By all means, and there's a lot of new technologies that are coming out that are not even lithium technologies.
Right. So last month, a study conducted by American Trucks revealed that 6 out of 10 truck owners did not consider Tesla Cybertruck a real truck. I mean, some of us had suspected that. You know, the look and feel of a pickup truck is very iconic. And most of the manufacturers have stayed with that look and feel, whereas Tesla came along and deviated completely from that, what people were expecting. So here's a bit more. It turns out that the electric pickup truck market is still pretty much in its infancy. Today, there are only a few electric trucks available, such as the Rivian R1T, the Ford F-150 Lightning, and the GMC Hummer. And of course, the Tesla Cybertruck is the next in line. Once Tesla actually ramps up, they say, the situation would likely change in terms of acceptance. But what people are going to look for is, if it's a legitimate truck, it needs to prove itself, it needs to be able to stand toe-to-toe and possibly even exceed comparable trucks that are in the market today. They do point out that the style preference that Tesla chose for their pickup truck was really an interesting aesthetic, they say. It will take truck drivers some time to adjust, which was our take as well. But depending on how it performs, that may solve the problem. If this truck actually exceeds things that are in the market today, it looks like we may have a winner. Now remember, there are over $1.5 million reservations for the Cybertruck, so the demand is pretty heavy. I'm not sure that any of the other manufacturers have anywhere near that kind of a backlog or demand. And of course, they say that the Cybertruck isn't just for truck drivers. You know, there may be people that decide that a Cybertruck is important because they make occasional trips to Home Depot. Or the hipster movement may decide that this is a vehicle that they would like to be seen in.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see. They do point out that Tesla, this isn't the first time that Tesla has broken the mold and made compelling enough vehicles to persuade enough people to try them. And they did that with the Model S, they did that with the Model 3, and that has paid off in spades. The unveiling of the Cybertruck, it includes a 500-mile range, is what they're talking about now, 14,000-pound towing capacity, so it'll handle that camper, and a 3,500-pound payload. And it will have other features such as vault storage in the rear and generous frunk storage as well. Remember the frunk, there's no engine, so that whole section in the front there is going to be available for some type of storage. And they're even touting rear wheel steering will also be standard on the Cybertrucks.
People are going to have to learn how to drive all over again. But those specs put the Cybertruck in line with the Super Duty trucks that are made by GM and Ford, the F-250 or F-350 for Ford, or the Silverado HD. And if those specs do hold true, And if Cybertruck doesn't end up suffering the same problems that Ford suffered with their F-150, where a 300-mile battery, once put under load, turned into a 100-mile battery, those would be real game changers. Ewan Caldwell on YouTube Shorts has commented as well on this, where he says if the Cybertruck comes out with a 500-mile battery, it could or will win the market. Ewan, I think you've got a really good point.
And then Smuggler, welcome Smuggler. He points out that battery breakthroughs are going to be the key to widespread EV adoption. Absolutely, for a number of reasons, not just range, you don't have to stop as often to charge, but also cost. In a later segment here, we're going to talk about the reduction in lithium costs.
Yes.
Now that everyone's jumping on the bandwagon, realizing that they want to be in the mining business to feed the lithium market, prices are tumbling, prices are coming down. And of course, that all translates into a reduced MSRP on the electric vehicles. And we're reaching those crossover points where it's going to be less expensive to buy an EV than to buy that ICE car. And then the rest of the population comes into the EV movement.
Yeah, then it goes really fast.
Well, it looks like Tesla is going to, or they expect to lose the $7,500 tax credit because their batteries are made in China. Since January, the electric auto manufacturers have been enjoying the surge in demand thanks to this new federal tax credit. In fact, Doug Platten bought his car, a Model Y, and $7,500 tax credit put this thing down to just barely at $40,000 for a brand new car with warranty. You know, Tesla has been one of the biggest winners since the buyers completely lost access to the tax credit years ago after the automaker hit 200,000 deliveries in the United States, which disqualified them. But this new $7,500 tax credit for the last 3 months now has been making Model 3s and Ys very attractive, and those are Tesla's cheapest models. But things will change by the end of March. It looks like it's going away, and the requirement will be that the vehicles are made 100% in North America. Which probably brings up the Mexico factory, the Gigafactory.
That's right, because North America is not necessarily United States. Automotive makers have known for many years that made in America can mean Canada, it can mean the United States, it can mean Mexico. So with Tesla putting a new Gigafactory into Mexico, that's going to help them with the overall assembly and keeping that Made in America moniker. However, as Smuggler has said to us as well this morning, Smuggler says cost is the big thing. Batteries are the single largest cost item on EVs. You're exactly right, Smuggler. The batteries can cost as much as half of the value of the EV, and it's a part valuation item that the U.S. government is using. They're going to be transitioning up to 100%, and it starts, I believe it starts all the way up at 70%. Those of you out there, please correct me if I'm wrong. It then steps up, eventually goes like to 80%, and then eventually 100% of all costs need to come from North American.
And of course, as these battery costs continue to decline, the raw materials, eventually the finished product, it will begin to solve the problem that exists now, which is once an EV goes out of warranty and a customer is faced with a replacement, $22,000 in the case of a Model S for a car that's worth maybe $30,000, it's going to solve that problem as well, because proportionately now that replacement cost won't be quite as drastic or severe.
Right. You know, that's so the made in North America is definitely going to become a very big thing. I know that part of this was because the U.S. government was trying to decouple the United States from China, insofar as the number of imports that we've had coming from China for goodness dozens of years.
You know, there's an interesting question that Smuggler has just posed. But is a battery pack made of Chinese cells but assembled in America count as made in America? We ran into this 20, 30 years ago with our Datacom products.
Yes.
And as long as we could demonstrate that there was sufficient amount of labor in the assembly of a product, even though the materials or portions of that assembly were sourced globally, not just China, we were able to put a Made in USA moniker on that part. But the percentage back then, and it's fuzzy right now, was I think just over 50%. Of course, using American labor, it's not hard to come up with that kind of labor cost compared to the parts of the world where these things were usually made and the majority of labor resided.
And I think it has to do with cost more than it has to do with assembly. You know, where I learned about the Made in America equals Mexico plus United States plus Canada goes back to our data cabling business as well. One of our large suppliers of Made in America cables has their assembly plant in Mexico, and they have their fabrication plant in Mexico as well. So they are able to say that the products are made in America because they get assembled here in the North America. And we found that that's been true for EVs as well.
Yeah. You know, to put all that in perspective, a sales rep we had working here 35 years ago, Ray Ward, he told me one time, and it stuck with me all this time, he said, you know, Pete, there is no such thing as cost of raw materials. Everything on the planet is either scarce or plentiful. The instant it begins to get processed, you have labor. Everything is cost of labor because the raw materials are either laying on the ground, but by the time you have to dig them up, process them, ship them, transport them, everything is labor.
That's a great point.
Looks like we got a few questions streaming in here.
Smuggler has asked as well, but is a battery pack made of Chinese cells but assembled in America count as made in America? That's what we were just talking about. I think what's going to happen is it's going to become the cost of the materials or of the pre-assembly that took place in China or elsewhere in the world that's going to be the qualifier as to whether something is counted as made in America or not. And that's where those percentages come in. And why I think those percentages are dealing with dollar cost amounts instead of labor time amounts.
You know, that reminds me, when we were briefly in the solar business, looking into making solar panels here in the United States, this was like 15 years ago or so, you could buy the solar bricks in China, and as long as you bought the bricks and then did the final assembly and created the aluminum frame and the glass top and the wiring and all of that, it then qualified as made in USA. So anyway, we're probably off on a tangent here, but it's interesting how these fine lines will determine whether there's a $7,500 tax credit available or not.
By all means, and like most things, it is incredibly political.
So Tesla is, of course, poised to benefit from the rapidly dropping lithium prices. Now, I've got some stats here. And particularly in China, they say, where the automaker produces nearly half its vehicles. I didn't know that. Half the cars are made in China. That's a new statistic, apparently.
I did not know that either.
Of course, later on, we'll talk about Germany, how they just hit 5,000 cars per week, and that one's coming up rapidly. So prices, the cost of lithium. It turns out that there is a massive amount of mining that has been encouraged by the demand for lithium. China's lithium market reached 260,000 yuan, which is $38,000 per ton today, they say. This was yesterday. And it's less than half the price from November of last year. I remember it was about $70,000 per ton last year. So given this context, Reuters points out that analysts expect the price of lithium in China to fall or continue to fall toward the end of this year. Lithium extraction and refining capabilities have skyrocketed. Now, the danger there is, as these new technologies are coming along, like the sodium battery that you talked about a couple of weeks ago, you know, will all of these lithium mines, will they see their return on investment? And that's the problem in a disruptive market where you have rapid exponential changes in technology. Oftentimes there's some losers there that are trying to accommodate the demand and, you know, end up falling short because the technology has changed and replaced it.
Well, by all means, and it looks like the lithium pricing was really just a price bubble. There was a lot of talk about all these new people that were coming in, or all these new companies that were coming in to manufacture EVs, all of this new demand. And oh my gosh, people are panicking. There are no lithium mines. There is no lithium extraction. You know, it's the end of the world. What are we going to do? Now we fast forward a couple of years. We haven't run out of lithium. In fact, lithium is being discovered all over the world, especially in places like South America, where there tends to be a little bit more political stability between the United States and South America than there is between the United States and China. Australia also has found tremendous lithium deposits. Goldman Sachs has estimated that demand for lithium-ion batteries between now and 2025 is going to really skyrocket. It's going to go up 25%, but supply is going to go up 35%.
Interesting.
So what we may be seeing is that high price was definitely a bubble, and that it's a long-term trend to go down, especially when, like you've just mentioned, there are new battery technologies like potassium ion or sodium ion that are both being tried out in the lab, and in the case of sodium ion, even being tried out in cars in the real world.
And this Amprium battery that we were talking about, or Amprius battery that we were talking about earlier, apparently the technology, precise technology, has not yet been made public, but we're anxiously waiting for that. By the way, when you mentioned South America, they say it is by far the most lithium-dense continent on the planet. And they say that Tesla's major cost in their vehicles is still the battery. So their business will improve tremendously as battery costs come down.
Yeah, it's you look at Tesla and how they maintain 25% gross margin. If the lithium battery is almost half of their car's cost, which I believe is the case, and lithium were to go down by half, which is also a very possible case. Okay, is Tesla going to hold a 50% margin, or are they going to say, you know what, we're going to keep our margins 25 to 30%, and we're going to just try to take over the market?
So this might be a good time to throw in, Jesse, can we throw up Elon's new girlfriend? And, you know, everybody loves a good rumor, right? And it turns out AI is no exception. So what we came across here was a picture of Elon holding hands with Mary Barra, the CEO of GM. And, you know, on the surface, it looks believable, I thought. But anyway, then you read on a bit, and it was actually posted as an AI-generated image, and it is fake news. In fact, Elon even chimed in, and his response was, I would never wear that outfit. It looks like it could almost be a member's jacket from the 1980s, but Elon has, however, been wearing ties recently. I don't know if you've noticed. He has had a number of court appearances where he was, he felt that he should be wearing suits, and recently I've seen him, you know, without the black t-shirts and more ties than I've ever seen before. So maybe this is a new look for him.
Maybe it is. I know for my part, the very first thing I thought of when I saw that image was, oh, that can't be Elon. He has a tie on.
Right, right. But they do point out that Mary Barra is happily married, and that this is fake news, but it is entertaining nonetheless. So if you like rumors, there's a pretty good one this week anyway. Rivian has released their new over-the-air software update for all its R1T and R1S vehicles, R1T pickup truck and R1S SUV. And the key feature of this is an integration into Tesla supercharging network. It now displays Tesla superchargers on their Magic Dock screen. The amount, though, of superchargers available are only 11 at this point in time, so it's not overwhelming. And most of them are situated in New York State and 2 in California. But as of March 1st, 2023, Tesla has been allowing other brands of electric vehicles to recharge at their locations. And they are providing both a CCS1 plug for non-Tesla vehicles and the NACS plug used by Tesla and sold in North America. So it looks like that's going to begin to become more prevalent.
You know, I'm not really surprised at that. How are you going to know where to go to a Tesla charger that has a CCS adapter if you don't have the ability to find that charger? I could see the same thing going out to Google Auto, which is used by a few different EV manufacturers, including Volvo. I happen to drive a Volvo electric vehicle. There are a lot of manufacturers that still put out their own software, like Rivian, like Tesla, like Lucid. And I could see that possibility being the case as well.
It looks like we have a TikTok question from Todd. Welcome, Todd. What happened to the Lucid recall?
Now, Lucid has recalled 237 vehicles. I don't know a lot about this, Todd, but I can tell you that they've recalled that. It appears that there is a spring that was too tight and would not, and was causing some issues with the car. 237 is a pretty small number of vehicles. We will research, however, find out more of what's happening with the Lucid recall, and we'll get back. I'm sure you'll hear more about this on Thursday.
Todd also says Tesla is recalling over 300,000 of their EVs. Tesla only sold 1.1 million EVs last year. Isn't that a lot? Well, the first thing to remember is recalls in the old days meant that the vehicle actually had to get either transported or driven to a service center somewhere. Loaners had to be arranged if possible, and it was pretty cumbersome, very costly for the manufacturers. The majority of Tesla's recalls generally are over-the-air updates. When the NHTSA gets involved and wants a recall, typically Tesla is able to solve that with a firmware upload to the vehicles. There is, however, one that we became aware of today, and we don't have a lot of information yet. Apparently there's a seatbelt problem with Teslas. Richard, you were actually reading about that.
Yeah, I read very briefly on that. I wasn't able to get into the detail of how many were recalled, but I can look into that right now.
But yeah, a seatbelt recall, and this is what we were discussing, no longer allows an over-the-air update. Apparently there's a mechanical issue, and if replacement is necessary or some sort of repair to the seatbelt system, that's going to be very costly for Tesla to handle that many cars.
That one definitely could be. You know, the full self-driving recall that affected about 275,000 vehicles this last year, I believe. But that was vehicles over several model years as well. So while it's definitely true, Tesla sold over 1 million vehicles this last year. I think it was a little bit more than the 1.1 million, but this is 300,000 vehicles out of, I believe it's 5 or 6 model years with vehicles. Whenever full self-driving first came out, which I think was 2016, please feel free, correct me if I'm wrong, that you have to count all of those vehicles, and now we're talking about more like 7 or 8 million vehicles possible, and 300,000 of those being recalled. So it's not quite as big a percentage as you would think, even though it's startling when you look at it as a single year.
So with the seatbelt thing,
Yeah.
it was there's an investigation going on right now for that. There isn't any recall in action at this point. There was a seatbelt recall back in 2022 for 24,000 Model 3s from the years 2017 to 2022, which, I mean, I don't know exactly how many they sold during that period, but it was definitely more than a couple million, most likely. So just an investigation at this point for the current issue.
Well, let's hope that gets resolved and some sort of a over-the-air update can be done.
Yes.
It'd be much less expensive. From YouTube Shorts, Ian Caldwell again says the Amprius battery is a silicone-based anode. And you know, Sandy did mention that, and they gave some reasons for why that's better, but not a very technical dissertation at this point, because it looks like Amprius has not released quite everything yet. We'll probably talk about this Thursday when he comes in and see if they have any new information for us.
Trucker Alistair is back on YouTube.
Welcome.
Welcome, Trucker, and glad to see you here today.
He says, hey, my favorite guys again, the Matrix agents.
By all means.
We've got to have some pills here on the table so we can really, stay with that theme.
That's right. We have to have red and blue, if I remember right. Smuggler has also replied to us again. Says they could install a card reader station at the superchargers, one per location, like they do for parking lots. swipe card, enter charger number. Smuggler, I think what they do actually is the electronic version of that. They make you get the Tesla app, even if you don't own a Tesla. You register your car, put in your payment method, tell it that you're there, and then you can start charging.
Yeah. Hey guys, can you pop up the Jim Farley picture? It's called Ford versus Tesla. And it looks like we've got a flamboyant, colorful CEO emerging. Remember, I made this point in a video a couple of years ago. How many of you can name the CEOs of these other car companies? Of course, Tesla immediately, you mentioned Elon, and it's gotten to the point where just that one name, like Elvis, tells you exactly who that
Right.
person is, right? Well, it looks like Ford is coming up, and in Elon, this is an article now, in Elon Musk-like fashion, Ford CEO Jim Farley made a bullish claim about self-driving tech and said that the automaker's next electric pickup will drive itself. So in an interview with Bloomberg that was published just Friday last week, Farley upped his company's pressure on Tesla, saying that the company's next electric truck is set to debut in 2025 and is a breakthrough product. Now, he goes a step further, and this is starting to sound like Elon to me. He says, on the highway, on a sunny day, you should be able to go to sleep in your truck or make a call or do whatever you want to do in that truck while it drives you. So right now, you can't buy a car that actually drives itself. Of course, Tesla has been close to that. There's always a new beta version, a new update of some type. But the other interesting thing about this is Ford, this is another article now, Ford targets Tesla in EV wars. So we've got a sort of a rivalry and a battle going on now. Ford has been coming after Tesla, they say, since it began focusing on electric vehicles like its F-150 Lightning and Mustang Mach-E. And the experts have said that Ford, now get this, the experts have predicted that Ford could surpass the EV market leader's sales by 2025. Now that sounds kind of far-fetched. Actually surpass Tesla's momentum, but that's what some of these experts are claiming. Ford apparently was the #2 seller of EVs in the U.S. in 2022. I did not know that either.
I did not know that either. It sounds like the potential of a budding rivalry could be there, but just like the large school that always beats the small school, and the small school says, there are rivals, and the large school is like, you're just another opponent. Right. That's kind of what it seems like is happening between Tesla and Ford right now. The one thing I do have to mention, though, when it comes to self-driving, Ford and General Motors and Stellantis, Dodge, they're all working on self-driving. They're not limited to just their electric vehicle platform. They've been working on this on their ICE vehicles for a number of years as well.
Good point, yeah.
So they've got a really wide base of vehicles that they work with. I think you've probably seen the commercials of the guy that hits his lap and claps, and while all the while his Chevy Silverado or GMC Sierra, I don't remember which one, is pulling over into the left lane to pass somebody while he's holding a trailer that has a big load on it. So there is that. This could be interesting. Ultimately, I think it's going to be good for the EV market no matter what happens.
Yeah, we need a little bit of controversy and rivalry. And by the way, the bluster continues. A quote now from Jim Farley again, CEO of Ford. He says, "We plan to challenge Tesla and all comers to become the top EV maker in the world." He said this last April. Well, it says, as ambitious as Farley has been about the automaker's electrification plans, Ford is on track to burn $3 billion on its EV business. So the question is, can they sustain that kind of a cash burn? And as we've always been hinting, that these incumbents, these auto manufacturers that have been in the business for many, many decades, well into the last century, are they going to be able to pivot, convert their existing production lines, retrain all of the people involved in building vehicles, and change their infrastructure and still survive? it's, in our estimation, easier for a new EV manufacturer to, with good funding, to come along and take some of this market share. So it'll be interesting how this whole thing unfolds over the next decade or so.
It definitely will be interesting. You know, I'm kind of pulling for Ford here. I think if they can get their act together and make some good vehicles, it's going to be good for the EV market overall.
Mm-hmm. So we've got a picture, if you guys, no, I guess I don't have a picture of this. It turns out that GM and Chevy has officially confirmed that the Camaro, as we know it, will end production in 2024. Now, unlike the last podcast where I was grieving the change that Lamborghini was undergoing and converting to electric and halting production on their wonderfully engineered ICE vehicle cars, the Camaro doesn't quite rank up there with the same loss of, well, I guess status with me. But there is a picture that if you guys can throw this up, it's the Corvette SUV. So GM appears to be, and this, by the way, is an artist rendering. And this is not the official release from GM, but this is what one artist has pictured the Corvette SUV looking like. Now, they killed the Camaro, and it looks like they're going to convert the Corvette name and moniker, which has been their successful sports car for many, many decades, into something different, like an SUV. And that part I'm not sure I agree with. You guys have opinions on that?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So I personally don't understand why they would take an already well-established platform or name why they would take an already well-established vehicle with, you know, personality, with a theme, with an idea, and people who support for that thing, kind of like what they did with the Mustang, right? And then just change it, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. They could just as well come out with a brand new line while maintaining the muscle car mentality and just doing, right, what Tesla's doing with the Roadster, right? They're just making a sports car.
Yeah.
Right. They could do the muscle car equivalent like with the Challenger and Dodge, but...
And, you know, it generally doesn't work well. Ford, if you remember, during the 50s had a wonderful little sports car called the Ford Thunderbird. Any of you remember the 1956 Thunderbird?
Yeah.
It was an iconic car, styling, everything. And within 10 years, the car got bloated. It became a luxury vehicle, a completely wrong direction, and it died.
Yeah, it did.
Basically went nowhere. That was one of my concerns with some of these supercar manufacturers, Ferrari, Lamborghini, you know, even McLaren, moving into electric vehicles. Are they going to be able to preserve the image that comes along with owning one of those types of cars? We don't quite know yet with the three that I mentioned, because they're still making ICE vehicles, and they haven't really gone full bore into EVs yet.
You know,
It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just like Ford makes the Mach-E. They call it a Mustang. I don't think of it as anything like a Mustang, except that it has tail lights that somewhat resemble what a Mustang would have. Same thing here. That SUV, it has tail lights, and if you were to see the picture of the front, you would see that the front looks somewhat like a Corvette. But it's not a Corvette, it's an SUV. It's a kind of a nameless type of vehicle.
And then, of course, there's that other, in my opinion, colossal mistake when GM decided we're going to continue the Corvette and we're going to migrate into EV, but we're going to make a hybrid Corvette first. And it just seems like a really bad decision. You have twice the amount of maintenance now. You don't have really any gains in terms of performance, and the cost, I'm sure, is going to be more than, you know, going either one platform or the other.
By all means. You know, we have a couple of really good comments on this from AP Zoo. Says that's bad.
Okay, I agree.
I agree too. And Ewan Caldwell, what's next? Hummer's going to make a sports car?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's kind of the other direction, but yeah, it's that same flawed philosophy, it seems to me. And you just kind of wonder what's going on. I'd love to be in the boardrooms at these large auto manufacturers where the design teams are talking about their evolution and their migration. And I'd love to hear the justifications for some of these types of changes because they just seem logically flawed, you know?
I have a theory on that, Pete.
He has a theory. All right,
Okay.
Richard, love to hear it.
So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in the movie industry and in TV industry, they've been regurgitating old ideas, remakes, right? Playing off of the name or the world or whatever it is that was successful in the past,
Right.
rather than creating something new. I think they're doing the same thing here. I think it's cost effective. You can get a renowned name out there like a Camaro. On a completely new platform, and people are going to gravitate towards it just because of that name Camaro. Right. I mean, that's
Okay.
It might be a marketing thing.
You have a good point there. I think it was in the 90s. I had just finished restoring a 1968 Dodge Charger. It's the Coke bottle design. It's one of the most iconic looking Dodges in existence, in my opinion anyway. And Dodge came out with a recreation of the Dodge Charger. It was a 4-door grocery getter sedan. It was anemic, and it looked nothing like the original styling cues. And for a while, it seemed that people were kind of warming up to this, but when I was driving down the street with my 68 Dodge Charger and I would see one of those abortions, it was interesting because, you know, people would begin to see the differences between the two. I remember I was in a gas station one time and there were people pointing it out and saying, "You got to be kidding me, look what they did to this car." Well, they learned something from that. When they came out with the next generation Dodge Challenger, they picked up the original styling cues to a large degree. There were certain things they couldn't do. You know, the chrome bumpers, for example, were way illegal by that time. They had to have all kinds of crash test stuff in the car, which tends to bloat the car a bit. But if you look at the Challenger later on, they did pick up some of those styling cues and eventually changed the Dodge Charger as it evolved, the new one, to look more like the original car. So I think you're right, Richard. I think that you can reactivate or revive a brand or a moniker or a vehicle name, but you kind of have to give it some justice by recreating some of the original styling cues as well.
You know, I've never heard a car called an abortion before. I think that's awesome.
So Tesla Europe. It turns out that they had previously celebrated 4,000 cars per week. We're talking about Giga Berlin, by the way. And sharing a photo of the factory floor with employees surrounding the Model Y vehicles. And Elon praised the team for doing great work. Well, they just crossed another milestone. They're now up to 5,000 cars per week and significant progress within 1 year. But let me give you some timelines here. The Giga Berlin's ramp up for Model Y so far, in March of 2022, the first Model Y was delivered. By June, 1,000 cars a week. By October 1st, 2,000 cars a week. December, 3,000. February, 4,000. And now in March, we're up to 5,000. Do you know what the eventual production goals and capacity for Giga Berlin are? It's actually 10,000 cars per week. And with an annual run rate of 250,000 cars, or 250,000 EVs. It'll be interesting to see, because EV adoption in Europe is quite rampant, where else they're going to locate on that continent.
You know, EV adoption in Europe, in China, or in Asia, in India, is far ahead of what the EV adoption rates are in the United States. Even today, close to 25% of all vehicles being sold in these countries are electrified already. And what that makes me think of too is if they were able to get Berlin up and running so quickly, look at what's going to happen in Mexico now. That's a bigger gigafactory than the Berlin gigafactory, bigger than Texas. I think Tesla, when they had stated that they want to be the largest manufacturer, they want to be selling 2.5 million cars a year, they're putting their actions where their words are. I think it's going to absolutely be able to happen.
They're on their way, and the demand is there. Can you guys throw up the picture of the Aptera vehicles? I found this article really interesting because they called Aptera the Solar Mobility Company. That's a nice ring, And
Yeah.
it truly is. It's a bunch of solar panels on wheels, basically. But they received their first fleet order from an eco-accelerator company called Sustainability Sooner. And the pre-order is for 101 400-mile range, all-wheel drive solar electric vehicles made by Aptera. The order is valued at around $3.35 million, and it represents one of the first large partnership for Aptera. You know, we're all rooting for these smaller companies that are doing noteworthy things, even, you know, Solo, Electromechanica. And it's great to see that they're getting some attention and some love from a large customer like this. And the company that purchased these, sustainabilitysooner.com, if you want to see more about this, says they ordered from Aptera because Aptera is building the most climate-positive vehicle on the planet. And this is according to David Fuller, the CEO of Sustainability Sooner. So interesting that I don't know what they're going to use them for. We'll probably report on that in some future podcast.
I think it's really encouraging for the little startups like that to get some of these big orders. You know, Lucid had seen some, Rivian had seen fleet orders from places such as Amazon. These orders really provide a kickstart to the manufacturers to be able to put out cars, to be able to earn revenue. Not only is it that they're getting the investment money, now suddenly it's going from, well, we're going to play at designing a car and figure something else out, to, we better get to work.
And it provides the cash flow necessary to keep the machine running to grow and expand.
Yes, by all means. Hey, Trucker Alistair has given us another comment, in this case a question. Says, I'd like to buy some Lucid stocks, and if you know where to get them, I'm new in stocks.
Oh, you're new? Okay. You know, I would say get yourself an E-Trade account. I used to use Merrill Lynch. I actually used to, 40, 50 years ago, go down to the Merrill Lynch office and watch the ticker. And they had a Quotron machine, and and it wasn't a regular keyboard. It wasn't QWERTY. It was alphabetical. You really had to think about what you were typing. But that's how we did investment back then. And you could sit in comfortable chairs and watch the stock, ticker going across. Of course, all of that is online now. But I really enjoy my E-Trade account. It's seamless. The percentages aren't too bad. The commissions, that sort of thing. And yeah, Lucid right now. It's down. I think the last time I saw it, it was like $6, $7 a share, which is really absurd based on its potential and the kind of funding that Lucid has. And what I mean by that is some of these companies aren't going to make it. You know, the investors are going to get cold feet. They're not going to see their return on investment quickly enough. And investors are fickle. They're going to move their money into something that gets them a faster rate of return if that manufacturer is taking too long to provide that. Lucid is a sure bet, in my opinion, because the Saudi investment fund owns a portion of it and is funding it. And as we know, the Saudis, their gig is up. Oil is definitely on its way out. ICE vehicles are on their way out. Fossil fuel burners are disappearing. And the Saudis badly need a second act. And Lucid is definitely a smart move for them because it keeps them in the transportation business.
Yes, and with the qualification, as I'm sure Jesse or Richard would say, that we're not financial advisors.
Right, we're not.
Real quick, guys, we are at 59 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
I am also bullish on Lucid stock. There are a lot of good platforms to use. I have used Robinhood in the past. I've used E-Trade in the past. Both of those seem to be really good platforms to be able to use for that. And either one would do a good job at getting you started, Trucker.
I would chime in as well. Trucker, don't pay commissions. Go to Vanguard. No commissions on most small trades. Their fees are the lowest in the industry. And I'm not just saying that because I used to work there.
Yeah,
I still maintain my accounts.
I figured he would do a Vanguard plug because it's his alma mater.
Yeah, so there are a lot of good places to be able to go. Hopefully that'll give you some ideas of where to start. So
we just talked about oil. I have a statistic for you. Based on quicker than expected moves to electric vehicles, a transition, the electric cars and light-duty trucks They now predict will make up 65% of new sales globally by 2030. We're talking about 7 years away. Over 50% will be EVs, and 85% by 2035. This is a report from Enverus, which also forecasts that the switch to electric vehicles will displace 2.7 million barrels of oil a day by 2030, as much as 5.2 million barrels of oil per day by 2035. And the total amount of oil used globally is 18 million barrels per day. So you can see how significant that is, which of course is another reason that the Saudis need to continue to invest in Lucid and get into the EV business.
Oil set up a new political order over the last century. And people and countries that were not political players at all on the world stage became major political players. The electric vehicle and EV is going to set up a new political order in the world. I can see places such as Chile and Australia becoming much more geopolitical powers due to the fact that they have such rich lithium-ion reserves. These numbers are mind-blowing. Just a couple months ago, you and I were talking about whether or not 50% was going to be an achievable goal by 2030, and how the US government and most European governments had mandated 50% adoption by 2030. Now it looks like it's going to be 65% and 85% by 2035, which is also faster than anything that we've ever heard before.
By the way, question that came in from Vinny on TikTok, what's the name of the stock? It is LCID. Lucid is LCID. On the, are they on the over-the-counter or?
I believe they are on the NASDAQ exchange.
And by the way, one thing we didn't mention, there is a lot of Tesla talent at Lucid. My son included. My son works for Lucid. Peter Rawlinson was the head of engineering at Tesla for a number of years, and of course worked on the Tesla Model S project. You see a lot of design aspects, similar design aspects between the two vehicles, and some improvements. One of the ones that Lucid does well, we repair the Model S and Model X battery packs, and we have to open them up in order to do so. And we have to preserve that lid. There's a gigantic steel lid on top of that, kind of like a sardine can, but we can't peel it off like a sardine can because we have to close it back up. So we very carefully and gingerly remove that, and it takes about a day because you have to chip and gouge and pry and, you know, loosen and heat up, and, you know, it turns out Lucid has the same type of flat battery, which is the floor of the car, but they use a gasket, which makes so much more sense when you think about it.
Oh, it totally does.
I mean, those of you that have worked on your ICE vehicles, you have a valve cover gasket, right? And when you need to adjust your valves, you simply loosen a bunch of 7/16 bolts, and that lid or that valve cover comes right off, and you have a cork gasket. If it isn't compressed, you can change it. It's inexpensive. You get it at AutoZone. You just have to make sure when you tighten it back, you torque it, because you can actually bend and then you get leaks.
Right.
But anyway, the whole point is a gasket makes so much more sense because it makes it serviceable. So that's just one of the design enhancements that we see between Lucid and Tesla.
Alan Caldwell on YouTube has asked us, what do you make of the Tesla share price at the moment?
Well, we're not advisors, but I can tell you I've been in Tesla stock since 2014. And every time it goes up, I get all excited and I decide, oh, it's time to sell. And then I kick myself later and say, what did I do that for? Tesla has nowhere to go but up. My opinion is you need to look at that as a long-range investment. Don't try to day trade Tesla stock, because it will surprise the heck out of you. You know, Elon says something, and the next thing you know, the shares are down 20%, and that has happened a number of times. Or something in the industry happens, you know, and it's not just Elon. I mean, we've got the guy over in Europe that's raising all kinds of ruckus there, and my opinion about Tesla's share price right now is it is still underpriced, and based on where it's been and where it can go. The thing I always look for is, where's the company going? What kind of goals do they have, and how much production is potentially going to come online? And if you look at all of the construction that's going on, you can extrapolate that out to what kind of production is going to occur once it's up and running, and we know it's going to be up and running, and how that affects the bottom line of the company and the gross revenue. And from that, the future looks very bright. And let's not forget, Tesla was a company that 12 years ago was almost bankrupt. They almost went bankrupt during the Model 3 launch, and today they are the 6th most valuable company on the planet in that short a period of time. They're doing something right.
Not only are they the 6th most valuable company on the planet, they are the most profitable automotive company on the planet right now. Mm-hmm. And you would think that an automotive company that's highly profitable would be in that cash cow mode where they're trying to keep expenses low, where they're trying to just milk all the profits out of the company that you could get, because that's usually what happens when a company is as highly profitable as Tesla is. They're not. They're in growth mode. They're taking a lot of their capital and reinvesting it into the company to make it grow even bigger. For that reason, I do think, is like you do, that the Tesla price right now overall is a little bit undervalued. I'm not sure that today it's worth the $900 that it was worth about a year and a half ago. But I'm also believe that my own opinion is that it has nowhere to go but up from where it's at. I don't think you're ever going to see Tesla get down to $75 and then camp in that area for the next year.
Mm-hmm. And Tesla doesn't behave like a profit-oriented large conglomerate or corporation. We were in Fremont, my son and I, about 4 years ago or so, and there's a gigantic sign as you walk into the Fremont facility, and it says, we assist the transition to sustainable energy usage. And I think they really believe that. I think that that is their goal. So as a result, don't expect them to behave like your traditional profit-seeking corporations.
Yes. We have, I know we're getting short on time, but we have one more question from A1 Caldwell. Is Gruber going to be fixing the Lucid battery in the future?
Absolutely. The technology between the Lucid and many of the batteries, the multi-cell 18650, even the 2170s. And by the way, we're going to be talking with Sandy about this 4680 cell Thursday, our ability to repair that, which will be under discussion. Yes, we are going to be fixing many types of EV batteries, and much of this product is currently under warranty, so we're not going to be able to see some of these new brands for a while. But once they come off warranty, that's when the EV customers show up at our service center, because our costs are different than the OEMs.
Yeah, I saw that with the Model S. We didn't have really anything in Model S business until about 2018, 2019. And that's when the Model S's were starting to come off of warranty. It really got started back up in 2020 when the 2012 battery system started to come off warranty. The 2018 and 2019 was the simpler stuff, door handles, window regulators, things of that sort.
Correct. So we would like to invite you to join us Thursday. We're going to have Sandy Monroe on this podcast, and it should be informative and interesting. Tomorrow we have our Tesla Roadster podcast. If any of you have Roadsters, feel free to join us for that. We also have a special guest there who's been with us once before. Jameson Cummings was employee number 195 at Tesla. He was hired as the first Tesla service technician, and of course worked on Roadsters back then. It was kind of funny. I was talking to him yesterday, and we talked about the differences between then and now, and he says, well, now that I'm in business for myself, he also works on Roadsters, by the way, up in the Bay Area. He says, one of my first wake-up calls was, I can no longer just walk in the parts room and get the part I need. I now have to really fish and try to fix something. So we'll be talking about that as well tomorrow. Join us. That podcast is at 4 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. It's Pacific and Mountain Standard Time,
yeah,
right?
It's
We're on the
Pacific
same
Daylight Time,
zones.
Mountain
Yeah.
Standard Time. It's the same time zone.
So he will be joining us, and we'll cover a lot of Roadster topics. And then Thursday is the broad EV podcast that we normally do. And it looks like Richard has a final statement.
Yes, I just wanted to cover a little bit more. So all of the statements today, especially that pertaining to financial matters, stocks and whatnot, are the opinions of everybody here. It was not intended to be any financial advice. That's not our position here. None of us are licensed. So take everything you heard with a grain of salt. Do your own research. This, again, is not a financial advice session.
Well said. All right, well, do we have anything else we want to cover, or has this been a successful podcast? We're wrapping up. I'm getting this signal here. So again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate our audience. You're the people that make us successful. Keep the questions coming. Anything that you'd like to ask us after the show, email it to ev@gruber.com. There is a video that you might want to check out on YouTube if you want to get educated on what the lifespan of these multi-cell cylindrical batteries are, because it looks like we're beginning to see our first end-of-life indications with the Tesla Roadster. And it's the latest video we posted. Can't miss it. It's kind of a cool thumbnail.
Check us out. We'll be on Spotify, as well as the platforms that we're on here, YouTube Shorts, LinkedIn, Facebook, and TikTok. And thank you guys again so much.
We'll see you Thursday. Or tomorrow.